What is up, thrash metal fanatics? Today I'm going to do my least favorite Razor album to favorite Razor album. And before I get this started, I will say Razor is one of my top favorite thrash bands. However, I never really obtained the album Decibels, and I actually completely missed out on the very newest Razor album that actually came out like a year or two ago or whatever. So I won't be including those two albums, just the ones that I know a lot from. And so all right, so let's start. My least favorite, and how many albums do they got here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, wait, hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, they got 7 I'm going to do. 7th, my least favorite is Open Hostility. The reason why, I think it's a good thrash album on its own. However, and I'm going to say some things here that might be an unpopular opinion. I feel like the riffs on there, I feel like it's like throwing notes into a blender, and there you go. There's your riff. You probably think I'm crazy, but this is kind of how I feel about like Open Hostility. I think it's good. There's good riffs. I just think it's kind of like throwing notes and riffs into a blender, and you just get some crazy result out of it. You know, like, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a great result. It's just, it's thrash, but that's pretty much all I can say. And this album also has Bob Reed. Now, I have nothing against Bob Reed, but I will admit I'm a much bigger Stace McLaren Sheepdog fan. I think he just has like one of the most ultimate thrash metal voices to me, and is probably one of my top favorite thrash metal vocalists, honestly. Bob Reed, this sounds kind of goofy, but I think he kind of reminds me of like an angry Gargamel from the Smurfs. But that's just me. But there's something about Stace McLaren that just sounds like, he just sounds like thrash to me. I don't know. And Open Hostility also has fake drums, so that by default, which they're not the worst sounding fake drums I've ever heard. I mean, it's not terrible, but it is what it is. It's a little machine-like, and that's not something I really want to hear from Razor. All right, number 6, Shotgun Justice. I think this is a really good album. I actually really like the way it sounds. I like the guitar sound of it. But again, it comes under that umbrella of, let's just throw a bunch of notes in a blender and see what comes out of it. I'm not saying every song is exactly like that, but it's mostly like that. Even if it's good and fun to listen to, it's just kind of how it is. And it's also a Bob Reed album, which, again, I have nothing against Bob Reed. That's just how I feel. I'm more of a Stace McLaren fan. But and some of the lyrics on here, I mean, they could either come under the impression of being just genius, great, or just like goofy. I don't know. Like, take the song Miami, for instance. I actually think they're pretty clever. They're interesting, that the songs actually have real stories. So that's pretty cool. Violence Condoned is another fun one. Like, the band doesn't get paid or something, and or something, they'd like tell the other metalheads to like tear up the bar or whatever. I don't know, something crazy like that. All right, number 5, Custom Killing. I actually recently rebought this, the High Roller Records version, mainly because I wanted a real copy. I had a bootleg of it, and this one has, it was remastered. And not that I'm really into remasters for the most part, but this is one of those albums that kind of needed it, because the original sounded kind of unfinished, like just kind of like a demo sort of. But this sounds a little better. It's almost got like that Evil Invaders production a little bit, but just a little more raw, a little more rough. But speaking of that, some of the music here kind of reminds me of Evil Invaders, a little bit. But there's also some songs that are really, really long. And like there's like a couple of songs that's like over the 10-minute mark, I think, or something like that. So the album kind of starts off that way. And these songs, I ain't gonna lie, I do feel like they're like kind of like random. Like I feel like the arrangement of the songs are kind of like they just feel random. I don't know. Like a lot of stuff just doesn't make sense, but at the same time, it's a fun listen. Like I don't know. It's like they're just throwing notes in there and riffs in there for the sake of throwing riffs in there. But it's cool. But it doesn't have that sound to me where like that throwing stuff into a blender type of sound. Like I feel like the riffs are kind of have like some direction, even if like the arrangements of the song don't have any direction at times. But that's just a couple of songs. The rest of the album's got normal songs on it, and honestly wouldn't be too far off from like Evil Invaders or something. But also it does have Stace McLaren on it, Sheepdog himself, which I don't know how he got that name, but yeah, he sounds really good on this. As a matter of fact, this is the most he's ever sounded like a regular singer. I mean, he actually like hits some higher notes on here and stuff. Like, it's kind of good. But yeah, it's just kind of like the almost like the forgotten or whatever Razor album, but it's actually really good. Number 4, Malicious Intent. This album's really fun. It's kind of like a really just messy, in-your-face album, but it still kind of contains like some of that early Razor sound when they still had a little bit of like that traditional metal meets new wave of British heavy metal type riffs, but just gone completely thrash, which is really cool. And Sheepdog just sounds like a maniac on this one. He's just out for blood on this one, and it's killer. The production is kind of it's kind of thin, but it's kind of cool. I kind of like the way this sounds, even if it does sound like a downgrade from Evil Invaders sound wise. I can't help it. I love the way it sounds. Now there's some songs that I think are well structured, and there's some that just feel like, you know, your randomized thrash songs, but I don't know. I tend to like most of this album. And there's even some like little goofy skits here and there that the guys in the band do, and it's kind of funny, especially the last track. But it's like a little bit of a slam towards glam metal or something. All right, number 3, Executioner song. Man, this album could probably almost be my favorite at times, but the reason why it gets the position that it does is because the songs are just so good and fun, and just, I mean, this album's almost more speed metal than it is like pure thrash. You know, Sheepdog sounds pretty good at times. Sometimes he's a little rough. I feel like the first couple of Razor albums, he's a little rough. I don't know if it's probably more of a budget issue than maybe a little bit of an inexperienced type of issue. But this album actually kind of sounds like sort of like a more brutal Kill 'Em All in a way. Yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of what it reminds me of. There's a couple of traditional metal songs on it too. I don't know, and there's even like a bit of melody, so that's kind of cool because Razor don't usually do melody a lot, but it works when they did it here. But the production is pretty awful. That's the only thing that kind of holds it back. I mean, it's just absolutely atrocious. Like, the guitars are super thin, but man, the music kind of makes up for it. So Violent Restitution, I'd say would be number 2. This album is like their Rain and Blood, okay? Like, this is like one of those crazy thrash albums that just works. And even though you can kind of say like the riffs on here are just kind of randomized, they really fit together well. I mean, just look at the first song, The Martial Arts. It's just basically a thrash instrumental, and yeah, it's just a bunch of random stuff just meshed together, like, you know, like a train of riffs and chaos. But it's done so well though, like it kind of feels like there was a purpose to, like, this riff follows this riff. It makes you like, you know, it just has like this, it gets more intense and more intense, and I don't know, it's just kind of what it sounds like to me. And a lot of the songs are kind of like that too. A lot of the songs are fairly short, but they just work. They just work. With that being said, really extreme styles of thrash can kind of get old and get a little boring and repetitious after a while. But Razor's one of those few bands that does a good job of not totally boring me. Like, they can hold my attention a little longer than some other bands out there. But I will admit, a lot of these, like this album, most Razor albums, I have a hard time listening to from beginning to end. And it's not because I think they're bad. It's just you kind of get your fill about midway through a lot of these albums. So sometimes it's better to skip around, you know. But I hate to say that, but I do kind of feel like, but that's just probably my taste in general. And I love extreme styles of thrash, but I mean, as long as it's entertaining. But Razor does a pretty good job of entertaining me. I ain't gonna lie. All right, and number one, it's got to be Evil Invaders. And speaking of albums that I don't finish, this one I always listen to from beginning to end. This is one of the few Razor albums. I can kind of do that with Executioner song too. But Evil Invaders does a really good job of breaking things up, in my opinion. And these songs, it's almost like another more intense, meaner Kill 'Em All in a way. But yeah, a lot meaner. And there's even a little bit of like maybe some Judas Priest moments here, but just done a heck of a lot more brutal. So yeah, and Sheepdog sounds a little bit raw here. There's some times where he sounds a little pitchy, and the timing's a little sloppy at times, but it's such a raw, brutal experience. Like it kind of doesn't really hurt it to me. And his screams, oh my gosh, I should have mentioned that on Violent Restitution. The album just starts off with the huge scream. He sounds like Screeching Tires, but he does some really good ones on Evil Invaders too. Like, this album's just kind of like raw, brutal, and probably one of the most brutal sounding production-wise to me out of all the Razor albums. This one just sounds so intense to me, and just so metal, and just, I don't know. But yeah, there we go. That's my least favorite to favorite Razor album. One of these days I'll check out Decibels. I think I've checked it out a couple of times and thought, it's not quite as good. I just never bought it. But I know there's some people that like it, so I don't know. And I've heard a couple tracks of the new album. It sounds good. If you like Bob Reed era Razor, like, it's good. So, and so by no means of like my least favorite Razor album on here. I don't have anything against Open Hostility or Shotgun Justice. I like those albums. I'm just saying that those are the two I probably listen to the least. Because I usually reach for the Sheepdog era ones, so that's just me. But anyway, if you like this video, like, subscribe, stay metal.